I'm not doing it this week. I'm not even going to try.
We're putting that in. That's sticking in. That's staying in. Just doing a snap. We are in.
Oh, yes.
Welcome to another edition.
Oh, you want to do it?
Well, you did it last time. I think.
Did I?
Yeah.
Okay, then go ahead.
Welcome to another edition of Splitting Hairs with Max, Nicky, and Nickon.
As usual, I'm Max.
I'm Nicky.
I'm Nickon.
And together we're
Max, Nicky, and Nickon. Who's got our grammar lesson for the week this week?
Oh, you mean for our the grammar corner?
Yeah. So we got anything? I want to actually bring back up. I don't feel like we were talking about my Vietnamese buddy and the spelling of his name. Maybe this one's a little better of an example. Okay, the name Sasha, like Sacha Baron Cohen. That's Sasha, right?
Right.
But he spells it
Sacha.
Sacha. And you could say, well, in Hebrew, I don't know, Hebrew, like, is it originally a Hebrew name? I don't know, but
Sasha
you could say
a Jewish.
I know it's a Jewish name, yeah. But like, you could say, well, in Hebrew, that's how it's spelled, and I would say that, sure, but in the English language, the sh sound is made by the sh letters going together, so. Why are we accepting this screwy spelling of a okay, so it's like it's a name that starts from a different language, right? Different alphabet, all that kind of stuff. So when translating it over to this new language, English, you should do your best to have it reflect the letters of the new alphabet so that, I
see what you're saying.
I just don't see the point. I don't
So
see
in
the
other
point in
words-
spelling Sasha with a C.
Yeah, so in other words, you're saying because it's a different alphabet, why not have changed? Yeah, it just doesn't quite add up, is what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there any other examples of CH in the English language being pronounced?
It actually, changing the name, it kind of reminds me of this kid we knew in elementary school. His name was David Jiang. But teachers had, for some reason, a hard time had a hard time pronouncing Jiang, so they actually changed their last name to Chung.
Oh wow! Well,
I think is terrible.
I think that was going overboard. With it, but
that's going overboard. Have we talked about this? I used to go by. I played Pee Wee football. First of all, let that sink in.
Wait, was it flag football or actual?
No, it was like helmets and all, shoulder pads.
Oh my God!
I know.
Yikes.
I'm just like a ticking time bomb for brain stuff to happen to me because I was taking hits to the head. So that's the way I am. How I am. But in that a very non-ethnic sport, football, American football, I went by Nick, and I felt like a fraud the whole time.
I completely empathize with you.
Well, not completely. I mean,
no,
your name is
no. Hold on, I empathize with you about feeling like not in the ethnic way, but just the shortening of Nick, going by Nick, like it's not really you. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I think that was the main point. Well, and there were also like people on my team who went to school with me, so separate from like the football team, and they were like, "Why are you going by Nick? Like I know what your real name is. Like you're not fooling anybody."
What's interesting is my
our cousin. Now we know to call you Nick from now on.
Our cousin, his name is Larry. Okay. Which is a pretty, American-sounding name, actually. But when he was at work, people called him what was it, Fred or something like that? He went by another name.
Wacky. That's wacky.
And it was weird. And his good friend of his that he used to surf with knew him as Larry, and he was just always like, "Why the hell are you going by this other name? You're Larry." Anyway,
yeah,
it's kind of weird.
Well, I once met this French guy when I was studying in Lyon, and his name was Larry. And I said, "Why is your name Larry? You're French." And he said, "My parents were big fans of the show Dallas, and
Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman plays JR, and they thought, oh, that would be a great name for our
What a segue.
So interesting.
What a
segue, Nicky. Very good. He didn't even intend that. Wow. But wait, hold on. Are we actually segueing from our grammar corner?
Well, I didn't get to really.
This would be a great
piggyback-
segue, but we're ruining
I didn't get
it.
to piggyback off of what.
This is splitting hairs.
Well,
where
I
we
will
ruin segues.
Okay, well, I will. We will let you know that our subject for today's episode is on broadcast or network television and
its demise.
Or do we want to say broadcast television in general, or what? Or,
I guess we could say broadcast television. I think
That's true. Well, they are networks. I mean,
well,
do we know what we're
actually?
talking about when we talk about the different things?
Oh, let's define our terms.
Well, we will
Yes.
define our terms in just a bit, okay? But before we do that, I just want to piggyback off of what Nickon just said. You know, sometimes I have a couple friends that call me Nick, and I agree with you. I feel like a fraud. I feel like.
But do
I'm
you
not
want,
a Nick,
Do you
I'm Nicky.
want them to call you Nick? Oh, so
Well,
they
I
just,
always tell them you can call me whatever you want, and
Oh, well, why do you do that? If you want to be called Nicky,
well, but Nickon, it was funny because when I was in
actually-
11th grade,
yeah.
there was a point where I met up with some friends from middle school that I hadn't seen in a few years, and I met a couple new people, and I said, "Oh, my name is Nick," and this girl who I knew in middle school, she was like, "Oh, you're going by Nick now?" And I was like, "No, I just." In my head, I thought, oh, people won't accept calling me Nicky for some reason. They would think it sounds like a kid's name or something like that. But ever since she said that, I was like, no, you got to stick to your guns, Nicky. You're Nicky Weinbach.
You're Nicky Weinbach.
Smart
You're
enough.
not a fish.
I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And gosh darn it, people like me.
You're not a fish. You're a man. That's from Half Baked. That actually. So okay. Well.
So,
I didn't
yes, I had
intend to
felt
bring
like
this
it.
up. Sure, but so this actually happened recently. So my name is Nickon. And long story short, there's this. I go to the gym every day. It's just part of my routine. I swim. And there's
That's good.
this.
I should
There's
do
this
that.
trainer.
Every
there. I'm
day?
not trying to brag. I'm not trying to. Oh, every weekday. Every day I go into the office.
Oh, my God. I'm so envious of you.
That's not what this is about, guys. But
Well, that's
thank you.
what it's become.
And there's this trainer there who's, I like when I go to the gym, I'm not trying to make friends. I'm not trying to have conversations. I'm just trying to get my workout out and go home, leave, right?
How long do you work out for?
About an hour, and then I swim for about half an hour.
Before or after work?
Before work, yeah.
Wow, you
So-
woke up that early. Okay, go on.
Well, I get into work a little late. Don't tell my boss. She knows.
Hopefully this gets big enough where she will know. Actually.
Yeah. So there's you develop acquaintanceships with people
Acquaintanceships.
Acquaintances,
because it's not a French. It's not a French.
Right,
It's an
I guess so.
acquaintanceship, yeah.
I guess so. Yeah.
And to varying degrees, right? There's the people that you just nod because you recognize their face. And you're like, hey, good morning, whatever, right? And then there's some people who go out of their way to try to become friends with you. And there's this one trainer. I'm already spending too much time with this, but this guy's been trying to he's been chatting me up every day. He sees me for the last 2 years, and he's clearly one of those people who just loves to hear himself talk. But he creates this he tries to put out this image of friendship and closeness with me, and I'm sure with a lot of people. But it kind of bugs me because he's asked me what my the proper pronunciation of my name, maybe I don't know, 20 times, and I feel like we covered it a year ago, and since then it's never come up again. Anyway, I was swimming a couple weeks ago, and there was a class coming up, and so when there's a class, they take away the lane lines. This is way too much for the story, and he needed someone to unhook the other side of the lane line, because he was on the other, and I was that person, I was just like there, but I wasn't paying attention. So he tries to get my attention. He's like, Nico, Nikon, and I just turn around and it's an indoor pool. So I just say it's Nickon, and it just echoes because it's an indoor. It's like this cavernous.
Nikon, Nikon.
I said, it's Nickon, and he's like, he's like, oh, sorry. Could you unhook the thing? So like I unhook it and I get out of the pool and I leave. But it was like, I don't know. It was like an entire childhood of having my name incorrectly pronounced, just coming up to this one moment where I was like, that is not how you pronounce my name. And it was just like especially annoying because this is a person who like has no problem just chatting with me for like minutes on end for years, and he hasn't bothered to learn how to properly pronounce my name. Let's cut that whole story. It was way too long.
Also,
No, that's really funny.
Also, Nikon is not a hard thing to get. That's not a hard name to pronounce or anything.
Yeah, once you learn it, I assume like it's okay. It's learned.
But it's also just exactly. But it's also just it's very easy.
Yeah, there's not a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it's Nikon. It's like very easy. Right. But also, here's another thing about it is, you guys are talking about the shortenings of your names. I go by the short version of my name. My full name is Maximilian. But I've never...
Well, my full name is Nicholas. So.
That's true. That is true, actually. But I've never gone by... I mean, once in a while, people will call me Maximilian. I mean, I have a friend who kind of affects this sort of, just kind of... Pretentiousness, yeah. I don't know, in a funny kind of way. So he'll call me Maximilian. That was in college. But for the most part, people just call me Max, I guess because it's just easier, Maximilian's
we're definitely
pretty long.
cutting this part out.
Well, Maximilian, it is a cool name, I think, but it's it's longer.
I had an acting teacher in college. He would always call me Nicholas, but it sounded so good. He always went, "Hello, Nicholas." Just the way he said it sounded like, yes, it's time for acting class.
Well, speaking that vocal quality, we had this Bach teacher that would sort of talk like this, "Oh, hello, Max. How's it going?" And he's like, "What classes are you going to take next semester?" "Oh, I'm going to take a French course. I'm going to take this Jewish civilization class." "Are you going to take the Bach class?" "Oh, yeah, for sure." And he's like, "Oh, that's all I wanted to know." Anyway, he's just this quaint English man. I don't know.
He was maybe the best professor we had in college.
That's true. But he did have this warmth in his vocal quality that he sort of talked like this, hello.
He's like, Professor Maroney, if you had to pick between William Byrd and Bach, who would you pick? And it's like, they're both just so good, I don't know. But if I was truly pushed up against the wall, I'd have to say Bach. He truly was the greatest.
Yeah. He's a great guy. Great lecturer.
We diverge. But let's get to the topic at hand. But before we do, just want to mention to all our listeners, if you like what you hear and see today, make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you're watching, and rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, if there is such a thing available. It really helps us build up our audience and allows us to continue doing this podcast.
Shall we mention?
Sure does.
A Patreon?
Oh, no, not
yet.
Well,
okay.
Anyway, let's move on to the subject at hand.
Finally. Oh, boy. That's
broadcast television.
Where's that?
Network
where's
television.
that segue when you want one?
Well, we had it a long time ago.
Yeah,
and
we'll figure out a way to splice it in, right? All right, network, broadcast television.
Nickon will be taking the side. Max will be the moderator on this one. Nickon will be taking the side of that.
Good riddance.
Good riddance to network television and all that's associated with it. Nicky is taking the side that there is something to be gained from continuing network television and things that perhaps the younger generations are missing out with it. Mm-hmm. All right, and go. No, I'm just kidding. Who wants to go first in this argument?
Well, I've already got a couple thoughts on this.
All right, go ahead.
One, and I know this might sound like some kind of grumpy old man.
You have 1 minute, Nicky. Just kidding.
I like this.
I know that this might sound like a grumpy old man, but network television, it builds character. You
gotta have to
when
back
we were
that up a
growing
little
up
bit more.
without these streaming services, we were forced to watch what was on television. And sometimes there was stuff that was seemingly boring, but it turned out to be good in the end after all, didn't it?
Oh man, I love this argument.
So when you're flipping through the channels, you're channel surfing. Channel surfing's not even a thing anymore, you know? So you're flipping through the channels.
I would argue that there is
hold on.
programming surfing actually on these platforms. Sometimes you are just looking through different shows.
You don't stay on a channel and say, "Oh, is this good?"
That's true.
That's
true.
For example,
So you're arguing for a waste of time and human capital.
no, because you're checking out the thing and you're like, "Oh, this is interesting. This is something new I haven't seen before." For example, and I know this isn't necessarily network television, but it was when it was on cable, was IFC, the Independent Film Channel. Sometimes we'd surf the channels and we would land on that and we would see, oh, what's this movie? This seems kind of good. And you end up watching this whole movie that you never heard of before.
Well,
and it was
were you watching the
educational.
whole movie, or were you watching the last 40 minutes of a movie because you could start it when you felt like it?
Okay.
But at the very least, Nickon, I will just back Nicky up on this, is it might interest you to watch the whole movie, because this is when Independent Film Channel really was, you were getting stuff that you hadn't heard of before, and you were just intrigued by what was on television, what was there, and you thought, maybe if this is showing, you'd have to look through either your TV guide or just the newspaper's version of the TV scheduling and look, oh, is this playing at another time? Because I'm going to try and watch the whole thing.
But
anyway,
not just this.
or the channel. Remember that channel? I guess it was a TV Guide channel where they would show. You would have
it
to
all
wait.
sucks,
It would
guys.
go through
All of the stuff you're talking about
It would go
sucks.
through like all the channels, and you would
good
like
riddance.
miss the thing, and you're like, oh, I gotta wait till it
exactly.
scrolls
What are
down
we
to the
talking about
back
here?
again.
No, Nickon.
This is pure just let's go back to a simpler time nostalgia.
I think you're wrong.
Well, keep going. Yeah.
I think that, okay, a big example of this is there are no longer any Saturday morning cartoons at all on any network channels anymore.
Right, because you can watch
We got
cartoons
excited as kids.
whenever,
We got excited to wake up
wherever
early on
you
Saturday,
want.
waiting for our favorite cartoons to show up on Saturday mornings. And these kids are spoiled now. They don't have to do that. They can just go on Netflix anytime they want, or Disney
So you
Plus.
mean their quality of life has improved? Is
No,
what you're
they're just
saying, and you
spoiled. They're just
resent them
spoiled
for it.
now.
Well, okay.
There's
Here's the thing.
spoiled.
there's no
Their
excitement.
life has improved.
There's no excitement.
Just because. Okay, so there were six cartoons on Saturday morning, and you were forced to watch all 6 of them regardless of their merits. Now you have all of the cartoons you could ever think about at your fingertips, and you can decide what is actually worth watching.
Well,
right?
I think here's what Nicky's here's the argument I think Nicky's trying to make, and then I'll also back up Nikon's argument as well. Nicky is saying you're being exposed to other cartoons that you might not otherwise have decided to look at.
You can still do that with streaming. You can be like, "Oh, what's this random thing? Let's check it out." It's
Okay,
all, now
but
it's
you
like
can
in
just
your
do
hands.
it anytime you
Right,
want.
but you
There's no
not if you're
not savoring
restricted to what's on television, you might just go bypass those things. If you're, especially if you're a kid and you're like, I want Yo Gabba Gabba, give me Yo Gabba Gabba.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Max.
That's all I want to watch.
Our one and a
I'm
half-
not going to try to watch anything else. Especially as a kid, you don't have that necessarily that curiosity to try and explore other things. You're just going to want
Our one and a half
has been tried and true for you to watch, and you're going to just stick with that.
Our
maybe.
1.5-year-old nephew is what who Max is referring to. He keeps.
Well, he's
he
1.5,
always.
you know.
He always, says Yo Gabba or Gabba. He says Gabba because he wants to watch the very toddler show Yo Gabba Gabba, And my sister and her husband could turn it on at a moment's notice to sort of appease the child. But
I will say that is a good thing too, because it could be helpful at times.
Yeah, but then it spoils the kid, doesn't it? I mean, it
Did
teaches
you guys
them
have
like
VHS tapes growing up?
yes.
Would you consider yourselves spoiled when I want to watch this Disney movie for the 1,000th time?
Don't get me wrong. We watched Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure over and over again.
Over and over again.
So it's the same thing, except with more options, and you're less beholden to whatever these programmers think or what we should put on. How many goddamn reruns? Have you rewatched some of these cartoons that were so great? By the way, like Ninja Turtles was my favorite cartoon, my whole favorite thing in the world.
It's so cool.
Have you rewatched it? It's incoherent. Like the original Ninja Turtles. Yeah, it's like they're just saying a bunch of nonsense, like I don't know, like
okay, but check it out.
Thoughts.
Batman the animated series, one of the best cartoons.
You would
of all
get
time.
home from school and it would be on at 5 p.m.
And if it's that good, then it'll be discovered.
Well, I understand what Nicky's saying.
No. Here's the thing, Nickon. When you, I'm not even just talking about cartoons though. When we were growing up, there were old shows that were on TV that we just got like Happy Days. We watched Happy Days a lot growing up because there were a lot of reruns of it. Or I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy was on reruns all the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And kids today, they don't even think to explore those older shows. And I think that's bad. I think
that's separate. That's a different thing altogether.
How is that separate?
That's like more of a disposition of a generation rather than those kids have just as much access, if not more, to I Love Lucy
but they're
and
not
all the reruns.
Do you think you would be interested if you weren't sort of almost forced to watch this stuff growing up because it was the only thing on TV?
True. There was a point.
No, if it's good, it's good. If it's worth watching, then it's worth watching.
But you wouldn't know.
Like, if you're saying it's so good that it's worth watching, and it's a shame to miss it. So with that, I think that shows like I Love Lucy do have an opportunity to be discovered.
Well, here's the thing.
And they're not.
What's his name? Cam. What did he say? He didn't watch Max?
No.
He didn't know who somebody was?
Well, no. We know a guy that didn't know. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, and I don't think this helps with the argument. But he didn't know who Steve Martin was actually. But
well, listen, that's insane. But okay, I think so there's a couple things. I think we are living in an increasingly more fragmented society, and moving away from terrestrial television or whatever you want to call it, broadcast TV, is one of the byproducts of modernization, and it sucks, but it's not. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle, right?
Oh, so you do say that sucks in some way.
I'm saying it sucks, but let's all acknowledge that this is the way things are going. It's like, hey, I wish vaudeville was back. Okay, okay. I wish a lot of things, but it's no longer. So it's not a sustainable model in today's environment.
Sure,
right?
I agree with. Here's the thing, to back up Nickon on this. Yes,
you're less of a moderator and just
you are not
agreeing with both
of
us.
You're not beholden to these. I mean, and back in the day, before our time, you were not. You were beholden to three networks actually, even 3 networks that were making all the decisions of what to watch on TV, and I mean that's almost monopolistic. I mean, I know that's not technically it's be one channel would be monopolistic, but I mean, 3
stick, I think, is the word.
Tropolix?
I think you just say oligarchy.
Oligarchistic.
Oligarchy is different. Oligopoly.
The new game by Milton.
No, Parker Brothers.
What?
Parker
Brothers. It was Parker Brothers? It's not Milton Bradley?
Parker Brothers does Monopoly.
Okay, well, anyway, the new game by Parker Brothers.
Right?
Oligopoly?
I don't know.
Okay,
Oligopoly.
Sure. Oligopoly. Anyway, 3 channels, and you're beholden to what they have to put on. What's cool about now is there's a lot more democratization of. I mean, you could even just be watching YouTube. You could put your own stuff out on YouTube. You don't have to be beholden to these networks. And that is what's cool about today's society is maybe everyone can have a piece of the pie a little bit. I will say, though, there is so much out there that something that is kind of cool. It's really, part of it is word of mouth a little bit is, hey, you should check out this show. But then at the same time, sometimes you just feel like, oh, there's so many things to check out.
Yeah.
You're sifting through a bunch of crap, actually, that you're like, what is good, actually? You know, I mean, that's
Totally.
also a drawback, I suppose, too, is that there maybe is too much out there.
There is definitely too much out there. We are definitely too fragmented, and there's no going back.
I will say, though, there was something about, like, for instance, in high school, Nicky and I, when we were little, we would do channel surfing, and we happened upon MASH, and we thought, this show has these earth tones that look, and it was boring looking, it wasn't vibrant looking, it was bland, and Nicky and I just would bypass it whenever we were little. And then in high school, I don't know if it was just, we were real TV addicts, I will say, when we were
I
younger.
was too, yeah.
And
We would do our homework in front of television, actually.
So would I,
yeah. So would I. And we were like, oh, this is the only thing on right now. Let's watch it. And we realized, whoa, this is a really good show. It's probably in the top 5 shows of all time for me. Maybe top 10.
And that show is
MASH.
Did you say that earlier?
I did, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but your brain wasn't ready for that kind of humor or that kind of commentary at that time, anyways, right? Like
when I was younger.
Like
that's
you hadn't
true.
even gotten half the references, or like
Absolutely.
You know,
You're probably-
why is this guy dressed like a gal? Like nobody gets it until you're at a certain
Okay, it's
age, and
not-
like, oh, he's just trying to avoid the draft or blah, whatever.
Sure, that too. But even just on a visual level, it didn't look appealing to a young kid. You know, everything looked pretty bland looking.
Right.
And for a reason, they wanted to make it. As you get older, you realize the reason behind that. But
Sure.
Anyway, it's really great. And now I don't know if, again, like, unless you had the influence of, you know, the older generations on you, you know, telling you, like, influencing you and telling you, hey, you should watch these shows.
Yeah.
You're not going to be, you may not be looking that independently as a high schooler anymore. You're not going to look out for that and be like,
think
I
that's a
should
good
try and
thing.
watch a show.
It forces
Why?
Because it forces cultural interaction rather than just like being mandated. Here's the stuff to watch right now. Like,
No, but
what
you're not independently searching that stuff out.
You're not independently searching stuff out by sitting on the couch and waiting for them to tell you what to watch next. There's
No,
nothing
but I'm
independent
saying
about that either.
But there is something independent, and you make it like you seeing this on the screen and deciding to wait for a moment and deciding yourself like, oh,
Yeah.
actually, this is.
I don't
this is
even need to
actually good.
argue.
I
Max
don't-
is doing it for me.
I'm gonna, without the influence.
I'm gonna
of
give this a chance.
Any parents or anybody else telling me, except for I guess the TV stations, I'm gonna decide to give this a chance myself. This is my choice to make right now.
Yeah, I'm going to give this a chance here.
Sure, but
like,
Whereas you may
again,
not even know
you're just
that
talking
you-
about a disposition, like
but
the
now-
same.
but-
you
but
can
you're
do
not-
the same
but-
thing on streaming.
No, you can't though, because it'll recommend you things in the vein of what you're already watching, as opposed to you.
But you're allowed to look at other stuff.
You are, but you're not gonna.
You're allowed
not
to
gonna,
search. You're allowed to.
You are allowed to search, but you're not
talk
gonna.
to, you're allowed to talk to other human beings and be like, "Hey,
You are-
what are you watching these days? Oh, that. Oh, never heard of that. Maybe I'll check that
okay,
out.
but
Oh, what's that on?
Okay, but
cool,
as
yeah.
I guess this is hard for us to grasp because we're in our mid-30s, but.
What does that have to do with it?
Well, let me explain. Is
no, I'm just
wait,
thinking about.
thing, yeah.
You just
yes,
turned
we're all in our
38,
mid-30s.
and you're still calling your mid-30s.
Oh, yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is, it would be interesting to talk to somebody that is, you know, a Gen Zer that's, you know, a high schooler right now experiencing.
I'll stop you right there. It would not be interesting to have a conversation.
I'm not. Well, no, it would be
No, I'm
because.
kidding.
No, I know you're kidding.
We love our
But,
Gen Z fans.
No,
do.
Yeah.
Now,
no,
give us
but
some
I
money.
think it would be interesting to talk with them is how. What is their process in choosing something to watch? I'd be hard. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Gen Zer. I don't want to include all Gen Zers here, of course, but a high schooler, let's say, that knows what MASH is. They're not going to be actively searching that for that kind of stuff on the streaming site.
Is
That's
that
what you have
okay?
to do is act.
Is there okay, let's go to books, right? Like literature. There are
Okay.
classics And there are the books that come out. They're, the New York Times bestsellers, and 2 years later, nobody talks about them anymore. And 100 years later, nobody even knows what they are. And that's probably okay because the ones, Catcher in the Rye, whatever, those ones stick around forever, until they're no longer relevant or accessible. With literature, you got books like The Great Gatsby, and they stick around for generations upon generations.
You had said Catcher in the Rye before, but
also
not to
Great
quibble,
Gatsby, not to split hairs. And it's okay that whatever, I don't know, 200 other books were published that year have fallen by the wayside, which isn't to say they didn't have their merits and weren't worth reading at that time, but it's a sign of a flourishing society when more art, let's say more storytelling replaces the stuff that is no longer resonant. So that's just how. Okay, so there's a couple of components here at play. So when we were that's not a bad analogy. In the 90s, there were, how many times have you heard someone say, like, this is the golden era of television? We're probably past it, but like television is, like, there's so much good TV out there that there's literally no room for you to watch any nonsense unless you're into nonsense or you feel like turning your brain off or whatever. So the stuff that is truly good will stick around, and like I Love Lucy is something that I would still watch every once in a while. But frankly, if society is progressing and more good stuff is being created, then you have to battle it out with all the other stuff, and like being beholden to whatever the programmers at a network station tell you to watch is not the best way to get the best stuff out there.
So I think the book thing is not quite right for this because, one, we still read books from, the 1500s, even medieval times, I mean, we study. I mean, I studied medieval French literature in college, and some of those tales are classic. We still read Shakespeare, and that's Renaissance,
Sure.
And so, yes, the best things are going to stand the test of time. But I actually think that the books that are coming out today, there's hardly any books that are considered classics that are coming out today.
Well, that's the nature of
making something a classic. You can't.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess
unless
not
part
true.
of the promotion is saying
that's
an
not
instant
true.
classic.
It's like this is an instant classic.
But generally, it takes time for something to be considered a classic.
I think we could all agree that Game of Thrones is the most popular TV show of the past decade, right? Wouldn't you say so?
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you point to what the most popular book of the last decade was? I can't.
I mean, there were the Harry Potters.
50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey. I think
those aren't the last decade, really. But
that
all right,
probably.
What's your point? Like,
my point
just
is
because a classic hasn't come out in this decade doesn't mean classics aren't being produced.
I think that literature, and maybe this is just a fault of society, is that, and our sort of lack of attention spans, maybe. But more people are watching TV than reading books, and
yeah, because all the storytellers are flocking to television,
and it's easier. And it's easier to watch a television show than read a book. So when you're surfing the channels, and you land on something, you're like, oh, this seems kind of good. Let me see what it's about. You don't do that with books.
Sure,
you don't just like you don't sample different books and be like, oh, this is the book I want to read right now.
Right.
So I think this television to book analogy is not quite right for this argument.
Well, it's not 100% in parody, but do you get my point?
Sure, I do. But,
okay, so
but Max wanted to say something.
I do want to mention why I also think this analogy is not the best, is because schools promote the classics of books classics. They promote reading. They do not promote TV watching, actually. So these things are not,
even though they should.
They're not going to be remembered. We're not going to perpetuate the existence of these television shows in our zeitgeist or in our minds throughout the years because they're just not done so in school. In high school, for instance, we do learn the classics. That's why we read those classics. That's why they've stood the test of time, is because school will continue to promote reading those things. And we don't do that with television. I mean, we do that. Maybe our parents might say, hey, you should watch this. But the way Nicky and I found out about television shows was by watching TV.
Yeah, I mean,
when we were younger, and happening upon these things. Actually.
We became fans of...
And Nick at Night,
We became fans of like Cheers and Family Ties and The Cosby Show because of, channels like Nick at Night and to a lesser, and just they would be played on reruns during the daytime, like on Fox. On Fox, for example, I Love Lucy would be played every day probably during the daytime.
Right.
Same with Happy Days.
Probably being played for the retired people that were at home during the
right, of course.
And we'd probably have to ask a Gen Zer this, but,
but how much
would I choose to watch that if it wasn't already on TV?
It's impossible to know.
Well, we could ask a Gen Zer. This one Gen Zer, we were talking about Ted Danson, and he said, "Who's that?" And we're like, from Cheers? And he's like, Cheers? He's like, oh, is he the guy that's in Curb Your Enthusiasm? And we're like,
he is.
He is, but that's not what he's known for.
Sure, that's understandable, though, at the same time. I mean, anyway, go ahead, Nickon, you were going to say
something.
Well,
I mean, I guess I'm confused. Like, you're basically, I mean, yeah, the kid was born... The kid was born later than you. Like, what do you want from him? Right. Like,
I'm just saying that because network television's lack of influence is being felt even more so today than ever before, the younger people are not getting exposed to art history in a manner of speaking, and I think that's bad.
I think it's I guess what you're saying is that you would rather there was orders of magnitude less content being produced, period, so that you could have a more likely shared foundation of culture with any stranger off the street.
That's an interesting point, actually. But that's interesting. You're saying you could argue this right now. I don't necessarily agree with this, by the way, Nickon, because I'm agreeing towards what you're saying a little bit more with regards to that. But it is interesting that it does give a sense of community. Like, for instance, we talked about Larry Hagman before. I mean, we weren't alive when this happened, but Who Shot JR was a huge cultural phenomenon in the U.S. when it came out. Everyone was wondering. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone watched the series finale of MASH. It has the highest amount. It's the highest watched TV show of all time, TV episode.
Is that right?
That's right. It was like, I mean, this is according to Nielsen ratings, but those are always probably slightly skewed because not everyone had a Nielsen box. Actually.
Sure, yeah.
But what they realized is, everyone was watching it
at the same time. That's
true. At the same time,
I actually do think that maybe the numbers of Game of Thrones, the number of people watching, might be similar to that, but they just didn't watch it all at the same time.
Well, I guess
adjusted for population growth. All that
right.
Kind of stuff.
So I guess so there is a sense of community. Actually, everyone can kind of relate to each other a little bit more. On the other hand,
water cooler talk.
On the other hand, Nickon, Game of Thrones, which existed during the streaming era that we are in now.
Yeah.
In order for something to be talked about as much as it has been, maybe it has to truly be that great to win out amongst all the other stuff that's out there. So
Yeah,
maybe,
and even then, it's not going to get the same, whatever they call it, share or whatever that Seinfeld used to, right?
Right.
That's
No, it's
true.
definitely
And
not.
actually, the thing is,
But again-
Seinfeld is still hugely popular today, actually. I mean,
Yeah, because
Well,
it's on all the time.
it's on all the
network
time.
TV.
Well, it's also on all the
It's on
time.
Netflix as well, but
It's on Netflix.
But
as well.
here's I guess here's my question. Like, okay, the amount of content that is being created today, how would you, if you were to say no more streaming, how would you program terrestrial television to support all that content?
You can't.
look, you can't. But also, we can't go back now, right? I mean, there's just
Right.
there
No.
wouldn't be as much content if we just had.
I think,
broadcast.
yeah, the only way to sustain, again, I think in my mind, the trade-off is a robust ecosystem where all of these different stories are being told versus collected, like a shared cultural experience. I
Yeah.
guess. That's the trade-off. And by the way, we have no choice because it's just the way the universe is going. But
But also,
There's also.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I did want to say one other kind of last argument for kind of maintaining some network television past the streaming.
Well, I guess that's
era.
also something Nicky's probably saying is he's not for going straight back to only network television. I think he's just saying he laments the demise of it completely. I think,
right, and
right?
and
Is that what you're saying, Nicky?
Yeah, and I know what you're going to argue, but your daily newscasts, world news or local news, I think it's important to watch this stuff live. And I know you can stream stuff live, makes it a little bit harder. Not everybody has that
I
kind
think
of immediate.
TV news is the worst thing to have happened to society in the last 50 years.
No, but for example, during
Network. Have you,
cable
seen,
or
have you seen the
otherwise.
movie Network?
during
Yes.
During
It's a
election,
very interesting commentary on all
look,
that.
there's some bad things, but during the election results, or just this past midterm election, I was turning on the news nonstop. Until
I don't know
things
that
were
that's a good
decided.
thing, though. I get why you were doing it. I'm not criticizing you for doing it, but like, I don't think that's good.
No, they were
know?
they were doing exactly what they wanted. They were getting ratings.
Sure, but there
know.
again there was this shared cultural phenomenon. Like in the '60s, people turned on the news to watch Walter Cronkite deliver the biggest headlines of the day, and it was
Collective cultural experience.
It was a collective cultural experience, and I think that's pretty neat.
I think so too. Yeah. And listen, I hate how fragmented society has become, mainly because the biggest thing for me is all of it, in an effort to gain the attention of all the fragmented, groups in a society. Publishers or whatever, broadcasters are going to the things that they think are going to garner the most egregious emotional reaction, which is driving us apart. So I don't think it's like, especially as far as news goes, I don't like how fragmented society is. That's
Right.
all.
And don't get me wrong, the
and
news
it's driving
can
us
be-
it's driving us apart. Yeah.
The news, I mean, this is a whole separate issue, obviously, the news, but sometimes you do turn on the news and you're like, this is what you're reporting on right now? Man, you really ran out of
Well, that's
topics. I mean, this is.
if the news gets to a point where it's talking about something really banal, that's kind of a good thing in a way, I think. Unless it's like, okay, more can be done, and there's nothing to report on that because nothing good is happening to you. I guess you could say
Arj
that as
Barker
well.
used to have that, or he had that joke.
But it also
where
means nothing bad. Nothing.
Well,
bad.
that's
I guess that's.
yeah.
Arj Barker had that
There's
joke.
a lot of bad that's still happening. Maybe it's just not being reported about.
Arj Barker had that joke where he's like, you never turn on the news and it's just nothing bad happened today. Everything is good in society and we're living a perfect life or something like that,
Yeah.
He's like, whenever you turn on the news, there's always something bad that they're going to report on, you know, because it makes for good ratings, I guess, right?
Right. Well, that's what that movie Network. If you haven't seen the movie Network, audience, please watch it. It's very, very good.
Very good. One of the best movies, I would say.
I do want to mention though I do think though there is something good about that you are not beholden though to. Okay, it was interesting. You were mentioning this about the fragmenting of television and society. Actually, is because of that they're going to try and go for something that's overly emotional to try and get the ratings or get the viewership that they want, maybe, and they're trying to maybe they're overly trying too hard, I guess, to try and.
But that's the news. So, like, you know, back to.
But even
what we were
maybe you could say
originally
argue that with television, with shows too. Even maybe that
with shows, it's like the thing that keeps you going is are you enjoying the show? And if you are, then you're going to keep watching. And
that's true. But maybe you
only have so many hours in the day to watch stuff, and you're going to watch the stuff. Okay, back to the volume thing. Given how much content there is out in the world, I am so glad that some guy in the middle of, you know, whatever isn't deciding what I'm going to be able to watch and when.
Sure. No, agreed actually. And I think, as I said, there's a lot more, it's much more democratic. I mean, you can get on some, you know, some production company or some streaming site. There's a lot of streaming sites. And so there's a lot more, as I said, everyone can have a piece of the pie a little bit.
I just found out a couple days ago that MGM has their own streaming site now. It's MGM Plus.
Yeah, there's like a ton. There's Paramount Plus, MGM Plus. There's like.
But as I said before,
it's endless.
But there's maybe a lot more crap too at the same time. You could.
Oh, there's definitely a lot more crap. But the good thing is, you don't have to watch it.
That's true. But I will say though, it is weird though. With all that said, as people in the entertainment industry and who know people, it still is very hard to get even a piece of that pie. Actually, it's still very hard.
Sure, but it is easier than it was.
It is easier than it was. That's true.
Not easier. It is. There's more access than there used to be. I shouldn't say easier because it's
true.
Still.
It is still very
impossibly
hard.
And
I do want to mention though, you know, that collective community thing though. Even though there was a shared consciousness, a shared collective experience. Not everyone necessarily related to that. You know,
exactly.
I've seen a lot of critics who are minorities that said, "I loved this show growing up, but I wished they had made a show that was more." That I could relate to a little bit more.
Sure,
that was not on television.
Well, they did that, but there were TV shows. I think you're downplaying the success of shows like the Cosby Show, for example, where
no, but even still, yes, the Cosby Show was
the
huge.
biggest TV show on TV, right?
I know. I'm not talking about. But you didn't see an Asian family like that.
Yeah, well, not that they didn't attempt that, right? I mean, you know, All American Girl, you know, Margaret Cho's.
I know,
show
but
in the
now though, there's a lot more attempts. There's a lot more attempts at that. You know,
that's another argument against network, which is if you're one of the three networks, you are only going to put stuff on that has a chance of getting whatever. A much larger percent of the population than a show like Fresh Off the Boat, which actually I think is was a
that is
terrestrial
network.
Show,
that is a network show.
But you get my point, right? Like at that time, if you weren't Cheers, then you know, good luck getting a renewal for your season.
Well, Cheers actually was
Cheers
dismal ratings when it first came out. Actually,
sure.
Cheers,
but you get my point. Like it's like sure. If you don't make it within the first 3 seasons, you're done. And in today's ecosystem, the expectation is much less. It's like if you can get, I don't know, whatever. I don't even know what the numbers are. If you can get 1 million eyeballs on a thing, then that's a success.
Right.
And you get to keep producing. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
good.
It's like.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
And also, All American Girl, that was one show about Asian people amongst, and that was just one, and then because it wasn't a hit, they stopped doing that. Actually,
exactly. And if that came out today, if it came out today, who knows how successful it would have been? Maybe they would have gone like 10 seasons because like it found its niche audience that was very much into like that specific tone of a show and like, you know,
sure.
Whatever.
I mean, critics had some things to say about it, but I wonder how critics would view it now. Anyway,
yeah,
it might have also been written differently.
What show are we talking about right now?
All American Girl.
Oh yeah. Anyway, I think we've said a lot about this subject. I guess my final word is that, look, I appreciate the streaming sites a lot. I do. And the shows that we put on all the time that are just on in the background are
old network
shows. They're The Simpsons seasons 1 through 8. They're Seinfeld and Frasier. Those are the 3 shows that Max and I watch all the time in our apartment.
We're watching other new stuff as well.
Thanks to streaming sites, we can have them on all day instead of the 6 times they play on network television
and also,
a day.
not only that, here's another thing about it is network television didn't play movies. Like, we have these movie channel, like we can stream movies.
Or if they did,
now.
they would break them up every 15 minutes with a commercial and you miss all like the interesting
and they were
scenes.
modified as well.
But I will say, I guess the main argument for keeping network television is to have that shared cultural experience, collective experience with the rest of the world. There's something special about that. And that still does exist with like sporting events.
There is, but what's interesting is, just to piggyback off of that.
I'm making my final word here.
Okay,
we're not arguing anymore, right?
No, I know, but okay, go ahead.
And
I don't forget.
So I like the idea of the shared cultural experience. I like learning about older shows and basically art history because of what you were sort of had to live with on the TV, on network or on broadcast television. You had to live with the reruns of something, but you actually learned about things because of that.
And I can guarantee you there are Gen Zers with your same disposition who will seek that kind of stuff out. You know, it's just not necessarily mainstream, because what is mainstream anymore?
Sure.
Right.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Any last words on
What
Nickon,
was
any
Max
last-
going to say? What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that. Go ahead, Nickon. I forgot exactly what I was going to say. Go ahead, Nickon, with you if you want a final word on this.
Listen, no one laments the. You want to go?
Well, I remember what I was about to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Nicky's talking about a collective experience. I love the idea of that. I mean, even during Game of Thrones, people at my work that I was working with who I might not otherwise have talked to, we were able to bond over that. That was a really great thing. But I will say what's kind of cool is in this kind of fragmented, there's so much out there. If you do find somebody that you're talking to and you can relate to them on a particular show, maybe you actually, that kind of reveals something a little bit more about your guys' personalities that you actually,
totally.
maybe you may have found somebody that can be a real true friend because you have, there's something, you actually share something. It's more revealing about your personalities that you both went to a show that isn't as hugely popular, and yet you both can talk about that. And that's kind of, even that personal shared experience is a little more intimate and maybe more meaningful in that way, perhaps.
Yeah, that makes a lot. I mean, I like that. Yeah. So as I was,
you lament.
Okay. Yeah. So no one laments the fragmentation of society more than I do. But and honestly, I think putting it in terms of television is almost silly compared to the much more insidious. Like we can't even agree on a basis for truth as a society because of fragmentation.
It is,
and it's
right.
That is driving the wedge and push half of the. I don't know how many people in the House of Representatives are just off their rockers because they don't have. Yeah, and so fragmentation.
Sorry, go ahead.
Fragmentation without some. Well, okay, so yes, that's a tangent. Sorry. Back to television. The fragmentation of television yes, I wish there was a Seinfeld of this generation so that we could all like, laugh about it together, whatever. But the trade-off is, would you trade off the volume of content? And I'm not saying more is just better, just flat out better, but more creates an ecosystem where only the best wins out. And I would argue the average show today is much better than the average show of 30 years ago. The average show. I'm not saying, hey, is this show better than Cheers or whatever. The average show. Or, even saying average.
I'd say the average
stupid.
drama show, but
It's hard to say about that because there was a lot less back then. So the average, it's hard to say actually. If something,
the average
if
you get my point.
Yeah,
you get my point.
I get
There's
your point.
there's a lot more good stuff coming out, and
That's arguable.
the trade-off.
arguable,
just
actually.
just raw numbers. If in the era of Cheers there were
There's
5
more
really
good
really
stuff.
solid shows,
Right, I guess
there
by
are
numbers, you're right. Okay,
far
fair
more
enough.
than 5 good shows
Sure,
right
sure, fair enough.
now. Would I trade that to go back to a time where I had to make fewer decisions on a minute by minute basis and all that kind of stuff? I actually don't know, but but here we are.
After all this
And-
arguing, I
and
don't
since
know,
we're-
actually.
And since we are here, I'm pretty happy with the endless selection of really solid content that I can watch whenever the hell I feel like it, not when
Sure.
some a-hole in some office somewhere decided that
Sure.
this is
well,
available to
I will
watch.
say this though, Nickon, and we didn't even really touch up on this. We don't have to, but YouTube is, I would say, YouTube is one of the most watched or viewed websites currently, and that is
Yeah.
a lot of people's television now.
Yeah.
we watch that in favor. We favor YouTube over actual, produced, professionally produced content, I guess, and sometimes
For
professionally
different
produced
reasons.
content is on YouTube, but
Well, people watch different. I mean, I watch YouTube for tutorials and for this kind of stuff. So, like, yes, I spend a lot of hours on there, but that doesn't mean I'm like that. It doesn't mean it's like filling the gap that network television once did or anything like
Sure,
that.
sure,
But yeah, YouTube is also one of them, one of the players.
it is one of them.
I just wanted to touch up on
Touch up.
or
Supposed to be a
touch
final thought.
upon.
Touch
I already. Well, I gave
on.
I gave a final thought already, but something you brought up was we can't even agree upon truth anymore, and I
Yeah.
do think television has a lot to say. Has a lot to do with that. Actually, I mean, the fact that we have. Well, and just the internet in general, I should say. It's not just
I think
television.
the
but
internet's far
This is a
more
whole
of
different topic, Max.
culprit.
Actually,
It is but I also think that
They're related. They are
I mean,
related.
like for instance, Fox News versus CNN. Those are television programs, networks, and they don't agree. As Nicky said before, in the '60s, everyone tuned into Walter Cronkite, and he told what people perceived as the truth, basically. And now it's
At
just
least there was a shared basis for
right.
conversation. You know?
Right.
You feel like paying less taxes. I'm okay paying more taxes for more services. Whatever. We all
Right.
agree. Like,
Right.
Whatever.
And but he was
the IRS should exist.
Right, but
and
he
isn't
was-
some kind of cabal of liberals trying to
right.
steal.
Well, and I shouldn't say CNN. I should also say MSNBC is also the other side of the spectrum on, Fox News.
Sure.
So there's a lot more bias in when there's more
love it when-
network television shows or network or just there's more television to give their opinion on. I guess there's you can gear that towards your specific niche and get the ratings you want from that, actually, instead of trying to appeal to a mass amount of people. You dig?
Yeah. No.
of course we did. Yeah,
Yeah. I think we all. I think we all agree.
I think we all agree, but we were arguing for the sake of argument, I guess.
I think we all agree. I sense that Nicky, you long for a simpler time, perhaps, maybe.
I do well. I don't long for a simpler
Nicky
time.
is
I
80
long,
years old, by the
I
way.
long for just the education of our younger generation more, and I think that is
cultural education.
Cultural education.
But again,
I think that
and
is
that's-
failed.
yeah.
That there's a failure there.
Yeah, and
Because of our
I
streaming
think television is but one of an ocean
Yes.
of ways in which this current generation lack the proper mechanism to contextualize anything.
Very good. Well put.
Like, you're just-
eruditely
you're-
put. Yeah.
Well, you're just living you're just being bombarded by stuff from everywhere. So
we're
you don't know
speaking-
what's real, what's current, what happened 50 years ago, what happened 1,000 years ago. It's all just coming at you.
Yeah, and I think I agree with Nickon in that there in that younger generation, there will be people that are going to seek these things out. We're making these generalizations as if this younger generation. We don't
I know
them
everyone.
well.
I know every
Just in the
single one
same
of
way
them.
that an older generation than us, our dad still does, even though he knows Nicky and I know a lot about old stuff, he still says, "Oh, your generation wouldn't know about this," and I'm like, we just said something that would prove to you that we would probably know that. So
Well, also,
older
let's also-
generations are always going to say our generation had it better somehow. It's always going to be like
No,
that.
but our dad also says, I think it's amazing that you guys know about this jazz music more than I do.
He
anyway,
does.
Matt, but
he
anyway.
does. But anyway,
yeah.
just to put
Matt, well, okay,
Okay.
that's good.
well, I was just going to say, it's always the younger generation.
Man.
The younger generation. We knew people in high
Keep
school
putting
that
your
didn't
hand
know.
in his frame.
We knew the people in high school that didn't know dick all about anything, right?
Yeah.
And so they didn't seek that stuff out.
I guess.
Well, that's kind of what
Trust
I'm
me,
saying
Nicky, I
too.
think
It's
that's-
like, let's not take for granted that I don't know what percentage of your class do you think watched MASH?
Exactly.
I watched
no,
MASH,
but some kids, I remember that seemed like total, meatheads. They even watched MASH, and I thought, oh,
yeah,
that's
but
because it
I
was on
don't
reruns.
think. Yeah.
Well, in any
Anyway,
event,
you guys, I think that's enough television talk for today.
I think we all win and society loses because of the direction that everything's going in.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Splitting Hairs with Max, Nicky, and Nickon.
please keep tuning in.
Yes. I don't know what to say. It's just yes.
I like the way that ended there.
All right.
Cool.